So welcome, everyone. We're so thrilled to see everyone online. And we're delighted that you're joining us for what is the inaugural Lighthouse Dialogue. My name is Fabienne, and I'm the Executive Director of Jamyang Buddhist Center. The Lighthouse Dialogue is a partnership, collaboration between Science and Wisdom Live and Jamyang Buddhist Center. And we're particularly thrilled that this inaugural event brings together again Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo and Vicki Mackenzie. So today we're going to be together for about an hour and a half. We'll have about 45 minutes of interview. Then we'll have a little 5-minute breaks. And then we'll have a 30-minute Q&A. So the opportunity for you to bring in your questions to Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo and Vicki. So it's my absolute delight to introduce both Vicki Mackenzie and Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. So I'll start to introduce Vicki. Vicki, first of all, thank you for joining us and agreeing to lead this interview, and especially to just in general lead this series of the Lighthouse Dialogue. We were really, really thrilled when we approached you and you said, yes, I'm game, and here you are. So we're both actually in the temple of Jamyang Buddhist Center in London. So Vicki Mackenzie is a long-term, very devoted Buddhist practitioner, met the Dharma in the 70s, and is an acclaimed journalist and author, has published a number of articles for national newspapers such as the Sunday Times, the Observer, the Sunday Telegraph. But of course, within our circle of Buddhism is known for writing, and for which we're so grateful, Cave in the Snow, which is what brought our attention to Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. And Cave in the Snow, which is the biography of Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, has been published now in over 22 languages around the world and is still being translated today. And I think this year was probably firstly published in Hindi, I heard. But of course, Vicki is the author of other books, such as Why Buddhism, doing a deep dive into understanding why Buddhism is so popular amongst Westerners, and Reincarnation, the Boy Lama, which is actually the book, I often tell Vicki this, which is the book which changed my life, because it brought to awareness the life of Lama Yeshe, the founder of Jamyang, and brought me into Buddhism. So I often say Vicki is the one who transformed my life, for which I'm very grateful. And then, of course, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, it's so wonderful to see you again. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We really, truly appreciate, and it's such a delight to see you. And we really look forward to this interview. So Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo is one of the first Westerners, male or female, to get ordained. And she's a fully ordained nun of the Drukpa lineage of the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. You started your 12-year retreat in the mountains when you were 33. And then after this retreat, when the biography was published, of course, your name became known around the world. But since your retreat, you also founded this wonderful nunnery in northern India of Dongyu Gatsal Ling, which is now over 120 nuns who are studying and practicing together. And when the nunnery started, the teachers were the monks, And now, 20 years later, it is the senior nuns who are teaching the younger nuns. And so Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo has been instrumental in supporting the education and practice of nuns and really inspiring nuns to come forward and build their confidence. And so Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, we're very grateful for all that you're contributing. And again, we're very, very delighted that you're here. So I give you Vicki Mackenzie interviewing Jetsunma Palmo. Thank you.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, Jetsunma. It strikes me as being extraordinary that it has been, I think, over 30 years since I actually interviewed you. And so it's a great privilege and pleasure for me to be sitting here today and meeting you again and asking you certain views and drawing on your great fount of wisdom. So I think that since this is about the Lighthouse Dialogues, Lighthouse because we are concentrating, focusing on those very unusual people in the world who have actually decided to devote their lives to really long-term and serious meditation and spiritual practices, not just in Buddhism, but in other faiths as well. But we're starting off with the Buddhist line. So I wondered, looking back now, you've been a nun, I think, I worked out about 57 years. Do you ever wonder how a girl from Bethnal Green, growing up amid the bomb damage of ravaged, war-torn London, without a sort of a note of Buddhism anywhere in the environment, came to be where you are now?
Oh, Vicki, they should read your book.
Well, I might have read it, but lots of other people haven't. I mean, do you see?
Go on.
Do you see a thread? That's really what I'm getting at.
Oh, yes. I mean, definitely. I mean, since I had been very, very young, I had always believed that we were inherently perfect, but that somehow we had lost sight of our true nature, and that therefore we had to be reborn again and again until we came back to a realization of our innate perfection. Now, don't tell me where I got that from, but that's what I believed. And I asked my mother what she thought, and she said, yes, that sounded sensible. So that my quest, even as a child into my teenage years, was what is perfection and how do we find it? And so, I mean, yeah. And also as an early childhood, I had known I was going to be a nun. When people asked, what are you going to do when you grow up? I said, I'm going to be a nun. Okay. And so I had no idea why, you know.
So it was in you. It was in you in a way.
Yeah, I just knew that. So, I mean, from a Buddhist point of view, we would say, well, you know, that's past life recall.
So why was it Buddhism that you found the path to perfection? Why not any other religion, like your homegrown Christianity, for example?
Well, you know, because first of all, I never believed in the idea of a creator God. And so that cut out almost every religion. I mean, right. I tried understanding Christianity. I even tried Islam and Hinduism. But all of it was based on our appreciation and relationship with some being outside of ourselves to whom we should feel grateful, and who was going to be pulling all the strings. And at the end of our performance, we would be judged. And I didn't believe it. But when I read about Buddhism, which of course is non-theistic, and not only did it explain that, about our innate perfection, but it gave a path. Truly, Vicki, the point was that the Buddha not only said, for example, be good, but he showed us how to be good, not just be kind, but techniques for cultivating our kindness. So as soon as I started just reading my first book on Buddhism, I knew this was it. I had always been a Buddhist. I just hadn't known it. So it was just a natural progression, really. It wasn't something, a bolt out of the blue.
So this is what really led you to devote a large portion of your life to really profound meditation practice. Now, I'm going to ask you the question that I asked you many, many years ago when I first met you, which is the question that most ordinary people want to know, not those who are already Buddhists and or those who are really sort of sincere spiritual practitioners, but those just the people, you know, ordinary people who are vaguely interested. They have the view that secreting yourself away for many years, looking inwards, is a kind of escape, and that it's like a running away from the harsh realities of life. And I wonder what you would say about that, Jetsunma. Now, you know,
I would say that being fixated on your television and radios, you know, being fixated in always going outwards, looking at things outside, you know, television, newspapers, your computer screen, people.
I don't think she can hear you.
Are we muted?
No, but I don't think she can hear you.
Can you hear me, Vicki?
No.
No. Mute, it says up there.
No, but we're not muted. We're audible. We're completely audible.
Doesn't sound muted to me.
Maybe I asked the wrong question.
No, it's not from our side.
Are you sure? This doesn't sound like it's doing anything.
No, but I mean, you shouldn't hear it, but they should be able to. Can it? I don't know how to interact. Let me see.
Are we back on?
I can hear you. You cannot hear me?
She can hear us, but we can't hear her.
Anyone can hear us?
I don't know.
It's difficult to interact.
Yes, we can hear you very well, but apparently they have some problems in the Gompa in Jamyang with the audio. Apologies for these, everyone. We'll try to get everything sorted as soon as possible.
Well, nothing we can do, just leave it.
I'm so glad I'm not at home.
Now we're muted. Oh,
Try again, Jetsunma Palmo.
try again, Jetsunma.
Vicki, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, we're back on.
There we go.
So you were asking about escapism.
Yeah.
Yes. And to my mind, people who spend most of their time avoiding their own inner state by endlessly watching television or interacting with their computers and their phones or reading newspapers, or they're worried, they're feeling a bit depressed, they lift up the phone and immediately call somebody. To my mind, that's escapism. Whereas when you're in a situation in retreat where there's nowhere to escape and you're just there with your mind, that is the true ability to face reality, because where is reality if not within our own consciousness?
Can't understand.
And so the people who cannot live with themselves without being endlessly distracted seem to me to be the true escapists. Can you hear me?
You're very blurred. Sorry, Jetsunma, you're quite blurred. I got the gist of what you were saying, so that is fine.
They can understand me. So there's something wrong with your connection. Marco, can you hear me?
Yes, loud
It's
and
clear?
clear.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there's something
Okay,
wrong
yes,
with
now
your
I can hear
connection,
you.
sweetheart.
So what you are doing, anybody who is doing real meditation practice, regardless of whatever path they are following, they're really looking within. It's an inner pursuit, isn't it, Jetsunma?
For any religion.
So, and within Buddhism, we talk about the mind a lot. Now, what we are doing is we are examining and we are looking at with honesty and barefacedness the state of our minds and what mind is. Could you please explain from a Buddhist point of view what actually is the mind? Is it the same as the brain? There's a lot of talk at the moment about Buddhism, science and quantum, this, that, and the other, which I'm not at all, au fait with. But it seems to me that is the mind located within us? Is it our thoughts? Could you please talk about the nature of the mind as you understand it, Jetsunma, and what the meditator is doing, going down into the deeper, finer levels of the mind in this great pursuit of perfection?
Well, Vicki, you know very well. I mean, the first thing to do is, to tame our monkey mind. In this case, we're talking about mind in the sense of our conceptual thoughts and feelings, right? As you said, mind has many levels. And can you hear me?
No.
No.
That's from their side. There's not much we can do. So let's see.
It's very difficult to have a dialogue if she can't hear me.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry we're experiencing some difficulties. I think it's the sound setup in the Gompa. We would like to suggest just a 5-minute break so we can sort it out and come back.
Let's do that. Let's do
That's
that.
a good idea.
Great. Okay.
Sorry, Vicki.
Sorry, I'm sorry too. It's frustrating. I'm longing to hear your answers.
Okay, so we'll be back in 5 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, then. Yeah.
Okay.
Are we back?
Say something.
You can welcome them back.
Thank
Can
you,
you hear me
everyone,
now?
for your patience.
Can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you now, Jetsunma.
Oh, but there's some strange noise.
Yeah, there might be some feedback. Can we try again? Vicki, can you hear us?
It's in the Gompa.
I can hear you, but it's very blurred.
It's to do with one of the microphones in the Gompa, I'm afraid. There's a feedback.
Okay, that's better.
Yes, it's much better.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. Glad we're back online. Thanks, everyone.
I'm so sorry. I apologize, Jetsunma. You're in
What's
mid-flow.
not your fault?
I know, but you're in mid-flow, and I'm not sure what people heard. I didn't hear it. So would you mind, so that I can keep track of where we were, can you just, explain to the outside audience what the nature of the mind actually is, and what the meditator is doing when they engage in these profound and lengthy years of meditation?
Well, basically, when we're talking about mind, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. When we're talking about mind, of course, mind is at many levels. Consciousness is at many levels. And in Buddhism, the word for a mind in Sanskrit is citta, which doesn't just mean the intellectual mind, but also the heart. So it's a kind of heart mind. And so they start with the fact that the Buddha said, compared our ordinary conceptual thinking mind to a monkey, and described it as the monkey mind, because it's always jumping all over the place. And it's it's not a monkey in the zoo just sitting there bored to tears. It's a monkey in the wild, which is always jumping around and fighting and feeding and copulating, and is totally untamed. So the first thing is to tame the mind. Taming the mind doesn't mean controlling it, beating it up. It means calming it down, making it more quiet, more amenable, and more workable, more flexible, so that if we want to put the mind here, it sits there, it settles there. If we want to put the mind here, it settles there. In other words, it is a very amenable mind, which has quietened down and is able to be then trained. So once the mind is quietened down and we have the ability to observe, then we look at the thoughts. Normally, when we are thinking, we are completely swept along by our thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, thoughts of ideas about the present. It's like a river. We are swept along by the river, and we're completely engulfed in the river. And that's mostly how people live their lives, just swept along. And so then in meditation, because we have now developed the ability to observe and not be swept along, it's like we're sitting on the banks of the river, watching the river going by. Instead of being swept along by the river, we're now watching the river. And so then we're not stopping the river. We're not damming the river. We're not trying not to think. But what we are trying to do is not be completely swept along by our thoughts, but instead be able to observe the thoughts. Observe the thoughts as thoughts and recognize that we are not our thoughts and that we do not need to believe everything we think just because we think it must be true. They're just impulses of energy in the brain, right? This is the brain. This is the great supercomputer up there, working everything out. I mean, we cannot go into this in huge detail, but in fact, neuroscience has been quite interesting in mapping that side of our mental activity. So now we have stepped out from that and we are simply observing it. In other words, we are being aware or we are being mindful. We are not the thoughts. And if we look at the thoughts, you know very well, if we look at the thoughts begin to quieten down and we recognize that they are essentially not real. They're not concrete. They're just flowing moment to moment. So in Buddhist terminology, we say they are empty because it looks like if we think of the thoughts as like a bubble, then that bubble is very clear and shiny and vibrant colors. But if you go click, where is it? It's empty. So all these thoughts, if we can step back and just observe the thoughts, then we have the ability to be present without being swept away. So that is it's not ultimate reality, but it's a big step forward. We no longer believe in everything we think just because we think it, you know how it goes. So that's the first step, right? It's an important step, you would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jetsunma, you were after perfection, and you said that mind in Sanskrit was chitta. It's the heart mind. So where does the heart come into this? We've talked about thoughts and the rationality, but when we see the really fine practitioners of Buddhism, indeed probably of all religion, we're not dazzled by their great philosophical or thinking abilities. We are moved by this great sort of warmth and loving kindness, which seems to emanate from them completely spontaneously. So what I want to know is, how does meditation produce that kind of heart quality, which is what really moves people, which is so, it's not just philosophically brilliant, you know, it's something which is anybody can feel, and those people don't even have to open their mouths, you know, you can just feel from their presence. So how do we get to that?
Well, there are two things here. One is on a relative level, because it is believed that our ultimate nature is not only wisdom, not just intellectual intelligence, but a knowing quality of the mind, which sees things as they really are, but also it's great love and compassion. That's our nature. You know, our problem is that we identify ourselves with everything which is not really me. And so what
do you mean? We identify
with Vicki, every spiritual path, not just Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, everybody knows that the divine by any name is within us, but it is obscured by our identification with the little me, the small self. That small self blocks our ability to open up into our true nature. And our true nature is wisdom and compassion by any name, right? So if we are in communion with that, then obviously great love and compassion will just pour out, because that's our true nature. But in the meantime, while we haven't yet managed to access our true nature and recognize our true nature, then there are many practices, for example, the four immeasurables, which help us to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, rejoicing in goodness, and equanimity, which starts very interestingly with giving our love and compassion towards ourselves.
Does it?
I think the Buddha understood that many people's problems with relating with other people and their issues with anger and jealousy and depression is because they are not at peace within themselves. They've not made friends with themselves. They're at war within themselves. They don't forgive themselves. They downgrade themselves. They simply don't have any compassion or real warmth just towards themselves. And so their ego, that small self which we are trying to dissolve, is very, very sick. And if we're sick, we are always thinking, oh, look at me, I'm sick. You know, like if we break our leg and we put it in a cast, and we're always thinking, oh, my poor leg, we can't walk. We are always, if anybody hits the leg, ow, it's my leg, my poor leg, my poor leg. Why? Because the leg is sick. When the leg is healed, we can run, skip, and jump. But we're not thinking leg, right? So the same with the ego. If the ego is sick, if the ego is not happy, if the ego feels sad or depressed or unloved, then we're always thinking me. Yeah. Poor me. And the problem is everybody else, because they don't understand me. If our ego is healthy, we're not thinking about ourselves very much. We're much more interested in others, and we can walk a spiritual path. The genuine spiritual path is all about how to dissolve the ego in order to open up into our true potential, which is literally beyond thought.
Wonderful.
All mystical schools teach this.
Yes, but
Buddhism has a very clear path. That's the thing with Buddhism.
Yes. It does. It has a roadmap. But
yes.
Jetsunma, what would you say to the many, many people in the West who are very now steeped in psychotherapeutic techniques to heal this, this wounded, sick ego that we all have? You know, and it's, you know, you delve into yourself in psychotherapy, and it's normally, there's quite a lot of digging up of your own past, you know, and this went wrong and that went wrong and this happened and that happened. Do you think that that helps us heal our wounded egos, or do you think there's another way, you know, of a better way of healing these wounded, sick, you know, beings that we are? You know, because it seems to me that a lot is put on blame on that Western approach, and Buddhism has come into the West, and I wondered what you felt about this, about that difference maybe between the meditator's path and the psychotherapeutic path. Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, you know, of course, Buddhist meditation is not psychiatry.
No.
And we're not really interested in delving into all the things which happened in our childhood. And, you know, it's all mummy's fault anyway, and so forth. It's trying just to see the conscious, what is consciousness, right? To experience what is consciousness at the varying subtle levels of our being, of our awareness. That's what it's really dealing with. But it does try to heal the ego by making friends. That's enough. Yeah. You know, but of course, in making friends with the self, we are also then, as you know, loving kindness and compassion to people we love, people we're neutral towards, people we have problems with. It's an open acceptance and loving, genuine love and compassion and forgiveness for all beings. They just start with the self because it's usually the self which is the problem. But we're not that absorbed in me, because otherwise, again, you're just getting caught up in, you know, in our me. you know, what we have to understand is that the me has never existed since the very beginning. It's just a fabrication of the brain. And, you know, we have a deeper level of our consciousness, which supports that. So it's like the me, the self is like the clouds. And our genuine, fundamental, primordial consciousness is like the sky. And the clouds exist in the sky, but they also can obscure the sky. So we don't see the sky, we only see the clouds. And what we need to recognize is that even with the clouds, the clouds exist because of the sky.
Yes.
And so what we're looking for is the sky, which is our pure awareness behind the coming and going of the thoughts. Sometimes when people are really very psychologically disturbed, then definitely psychotherapy can help.
Yeah.
But to get caught up in it too much, if we're not careful, it just becomes like, you know, just going round and round and round. We have to break through that to recognize our fundamental consciousness. And that's what meditation can do for us. Psychology cannot do that. Because psychology is only about making the ego feel a happy little ego at the best, but it cannot transcend the ego. And that's what all genuine spiritual paths are trying to do, is go beyond me, to something so much vaster, which is inconceivable to our conceptual thinking.
So, Jetsunma, I want to discuss with you now the question of fear. At the moment, as I'm sure you're aware, being your nunnery being in lockdown, there's so much fear and anxiety generally in the world at the moment. And I wondered if meditation and this path that you have trod so diligently can offer any help and remedies towards the kind of fears and insecurities that people are feeling, but people feel generally all the time, but particularly at this moment. Fear seems to me to be the big bogeyman at the bottom of everything, and maybe at the base of this ego that you're discussing. But I wondered if you could say anything to help people who are suffering from insecurity and fear at the moment.
Well, I think there's two kinds of fear. One is something which is, you know, I mean, in its own extent, fairly understandable. I mean, people are fearful of losing their jobs. People are fearful of the future for their children and so forth. And this is, in this climate that the world is in at the moment, is understandable. It's not helpful, but it's understandable. But there's also a kind of existential fear which is cultivated, especially by the media. I mean, the media is very busy trying to make everyone very paranoid. Because if we are paranoid, we are also able to be manipulated. And so we have to be careful about that. This is, honestly, this is samsara. Samsara means that it's this endless round of birth and death, which by its very nature is insecure, and by its very nature is unsatisfactory. So don't be surprised. We are never going to make samsara into a heavenly realm, because by its very nature, it isn't, right? Because we are still living in it as very flawed human beings, and therefore we are always endlessly messing things up anyway. But we can, outside, we cannot deal with it too much. We can do what we can for the environment. We can do what we can for any particular projects which we have a heart connection with, and that's very good. But in the end, the only way to deal with our fear and anxiety is from inside. And so therefore, this is where various kinds of meditation can be very helpful. We have to recognize that all our thoughts and anxiety is just a thought. Back to thoughts, we don't have to believe what we think, right? So we can see that thoughts are just thoughts. And we can also, as I say, cultivate love and cultivate compassion. First of all, to ourselves, to our loved ones, and to the whole planet. I think that it's very important to send out positive thoughts at a time when mostly everybody is encouraged to cultivate negative thoughts.
Yes.
They're negative thoughts of anxiety and fear and anger and general. These kind of thoughts are totally unhelpful. Mm. They do not help ourselves. They do not help others. They do not help the basic feeling on this planet. I mean, sometimes I say we are very involved about pollution. But honestly, the big pollutant is a psychic pollutant. You know, if we could see that surrounding our planet, we'd see how dark it is, dark and heavy, because the media are promoting anxiety constantly, COVID, job loss, all the different problems that are going to come up, and it's going to get worse. And everybody is just suspended in this agony of fear, even if at this particular point, actually, there's nothing terrible happening for them personally, but still it could happen tomorrow, then that's not a useful way to live. So to learn how to cultivate inner calm, cultivate inner sense of love and well-being and compassion, and send that out around the planet. I mean, to sit and just radiate love and compassion to all the world is a whole lot better than sitting there glued to the television, reading about the latest catastrophe somewhere or other. And what's the point? Why do we get fixated into the negative?
Well, I can tell you that because I've been a journalist, and disasters and bad news sells newspapers or sells media. For some reason, on it, like the disaster movies, the horror movies, people love it. They love to read. Aren't they
weird?
Yes, people love it. It's sort of, if you have a good story, I was taught that if you have a good story, oh God, it's just a feel good. It's a worthy, it's a worthy. We don't want worthies, I mean, it's just, you want something gritty and dark and awful, because people seem to like it in a way, which is very odd, I always think. Yeah. I want to ask you.
It is odd.
No, carry on. Yes, sorry.
I was just thinking, if you're in an airplane and you walk down the aisle and you see what people are watching, it's all about people being blown up and, shooting each other, shouting at each other. I mean, as if the world wasn't bad enough that you use that as entertainment.
Yes.
That's what you relax with, watching people, have car crashes. And really, human beings are weird, right?
Very weird. I mean, I was interested in what you said about we're in this, what Buddhists would call samsara, which is that we can never really get any satisfaction, proper satisfaction, lasting peace and happiness on this particular plane that we're on, and that it goes round and round and round with multiple rebirths until we manage to clear all the clouds and find out who we really are. But there's a big thrust, even within Buddhism, of disregarding reincarnation. People don't, for some reason, I don't know why, because it's been, kind of we've gone through that barrier once already. But there's a thrust that people don't want to discuss reincarnation. Do you know why or what that's about?
No, I mean, of course, Western Christianity threw out reincarnation way back when.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's become a major heresy. And so most people are brought up with the idea that either there is this one life and then after that you will be judged and rewarded or punished, or now more and more that as soon as you die, that's it, you're finished. And there's a big blank. I think that's really quite depressing. No wonder people are depressed. what disturbs me is that not that the society in general is not interested in reincarnation, rebirth, but that Western Buddhists are not interested in rebirth, because it makes nonsense of the whole Dharma, you know, that if there's only this lifetime, then what? You know, I mean, the whole point is that if we consider this just an endless cycle of birth and death and rebirth and re-death endlessly, then it makes sense to try to think of a solution, how to get out of this, or how to also help others to get out of it. I mean, bodhicitta, the aspiration to attain to awakening in order to benefit all beings through endless time and endless space, is made nonsense. Obviously, there's no bodhicitta. And even the idea of liberation from the cycle of birth and death and rebirth, re-death is made nonsense. In fact, then why do things happen to us as they happen? They just happen, right? I mean, you have three choices. Either God decides what's going to happen to you, in which case, you know, it's all up to him. And although we have free will, he sets the stage why you got reborn why you are born in the situation you're in, and mean with the situation you're going to be found in, and then how you deal with that. At the end, you're going to be judged. You know, you get a good score or a bad score. Or you could say, well, nothing really is predestined in any way. Things just happen, and how you deal with it is how you deal with it, because when we die, that's it. It's all finished. It's over. So this is a one performance, and you have to act the best way you can, which is fair enough. Many humanists believe that. But Buddhism says, no, what is happening to us is because we ourselves have sown those seeds, and now we're reaping that harvest. And so therefore, everything which happens to us in general, I mean, not everything, but most things, and the pattern of our life is because of causes which we ourselves have created in past lives. And then how we respond now to what is happening to us will be planting more seeds for the future. So moment to moment, we're eating up the past and creating our future. And therefore, it's very important how we respond to what is happening, whether we are skillful or unskillful. And even bad situations, if we act skillfully and learn from that, become positive.
Jetsunma, this goes back to what you were just talking about, what we were talking about at the beginning of this dialogue, which was the nature of the mind, because this whole thing of previous lives depends on understanding, according to Buddhism, what the mind is, which is that it's this stream, it's an immaterial, it's a stream. And so unless you understand what the mind is, which is what Buddhism is, its great sort of, it's an inner path of discovering the mind. I think that's very much to do with with accepting or thinking about rebirth. If you understand that mind is not just contained within this physical form. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the mind is like a stream, you know, so we leave behind the body, but that doesn't mean that consciousness is finished. Consciousness goes on. Not the conceptual thinking mind, but the deeper level of consciousness that links birth to birth to birth.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that at the end of this life, that's it, big blank out, then we are also saying that this consciousness is conditional. Whereas in all the understanding, it's that it is beyond time, it is beyond space, it is totally unconditioned. The Buddha called it the unconditioned, and he called it the unborn and the deathless, right? I mean, this is what the Buddha said. We're not making it up.
Yeah, the great scientist, the Buddha. I want to move tack a little bit now, Jetsunma, if you can bear bear with us. We had a break, at least I had a break. So maybe you can go for another 5 or 10 minutes. Would that be all right? I want to, okay, I'm getting the thumbs up here. So I want to talk now about, you have been a marvelous champion of females, of women, if we're allowed to use that word in this gender fluid day. I have to be careful here. I hope I don't offend anybody. But in the idea that women, the female form could also become enlightened. And with that in mind, you have established this nunnery to help and to foster the young women, particularly of the Himalayan region. And I want you to talk a little bit about the Togdenmas, who were these remarkable Tibetan yoginis who mostly were unseen, but were fantastic spiritual practitioners. And you have got some nuns in long-term retreat, training to be Togdenmas. How are they getting on? How many are there? Well, first of all, Jetsunma, how many nuns have you got generally now? And how many of them are Togdenmas?
We have now, I think, I'm not sure, I never count them, but probably somewhere around 120. They're all girls from the Himalaya regions, Tibet, of course, Ladakh, Kinnoor, Spiti, Arunachal, Sikkim, Bhutan. So they're all girls from these alien cultures, which are many of them geographically India, culturally. So they are studying, and we have about 12 nuns now in long-term. Yeah. Some of them have been there for nearly, next year, 12 years, some of them.
Yeah, and they're completely secluded, aren't they, from the rest of the nuns?
Yes, I mean, there's a high wall around the retreat center, and they don't, every 3 years they come out for a couple of weeks to meet with their friends and, you know, have health checkups and whatever, and then they go back in again.
And what is their...
I see them every 2 weeks, but nobody else does.
And are they being kind of given, in Western terms, tuition? Are they being given teachings? Are they being guided? Or how are they, what are they doing?
Yeah, they are under the direction of the, you know, I don't know if, because this connection is very difficult, but in our monastery of, in Kampaga near Tashi Jong, then there are these monks who are yogis called Togden. And the senior Togden, who was came from Tibet originally with the previous Kamtrul, he's their teacher. He's now 88, but he's still teaching. So he goes from time to time to give them instruction and guide them. But also now the younger ones coming in, the newer ones. For example, we have very recently 3 more nuns went in for a 3-year retreat, and they are mainly taught by the senior nuns who are in retreat. So they're teaching each other.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And eventually, will the Togdenmas come out and teach, or will they continue just practicing for the rest of their lives?
We don't know. We don't know. It's up to them. 1 or 2 of them speak very good English. So they might decide eventually to come out. I mean, it takes time. I mean, they have to be in retreat at least 15 years or more before they are considered fully cooked, right? At the moment, they're still cooking. They're still baking. When they're done all the way through and not just half cooked, then we will see what they want to do.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's wonderful. Do you think we'll ever see something like a female Dalai Lama? Do you think, is it improving at all, the patriarchal hierarchy?
I don't think we'll ever see a female Dalai Lama because he would not be accepted by the monks. But there are certainly young women, especially young nuns coming up, whose fathers are lamas. And so they have that background. You know, dad is a big lama, so therefore they come from a religious family, and they have that confidence. And they have these two girls that I'm thinking of. Both their fathers are lamas. And so they have gone through the full study program in their nunneries. And one of them has done 6-year retreat. One of them is now doing her first 3-year retreat. They both speak very, very good English. And they also have the confidence to teach.
So important.
So that's already opening up, you know, making a break. Also in the Sakya school,
Wonderful.
The granddaughter of the Sakya Trizin is a tulku. And she is also being trained to be a Lama who teaches.
Mm-hmm.
And so slowly, these young girls who are from very special families begin being given a voice. And that will encourage others likewise to follow.
That's wonderful. So one last question. I'm sorry to press you. One last question. Do you have any regrets about the life you chose? Anything, did you ever miss not having a family or a husband or a home or anything? I mean, do you ever had any regrets? I know the answer.
No. I mean, one of the deepest, my gratitude to myself is that I recognized at an early age what I needed to do this lifetime. I'm so grateful to myself for that. You know, I've never for 1 second regretted being a nun, which doesn't mean that we therefore should be monastics, but for myself personally, it was absolutely the right path. And I'm glad that I never got distracted away from knowing what I needed to do.
Well, thank you.
And I think our nuns feel that too, you know, I mean, they are so grateful that one of them, when she was caught in an accident, in a car accident, and the car overturned and she thought she was going to die, her 2 thoughts, she said, was first her deep gratitude that she was a nun, and then offering herself to Guru Padmasambhava, to Guru Rinpoche. I mean, she didn't die, of course, but that was her first thought, was how glad she was that she was a nun. I think for a lot of these girls, that's how they feel. It's not that that's necessary for, obviously, it's not necessary for practicing the path, but it does get rid of a lot of distractions and keep you on track.
Good. Well, I think a lot of people around the world are very, very, very grateful to you, Jetsunma, you know, for being a nun and keeping on this path, and really for doing what you have done and what you have given out. And I'm particularly very grateful to you for allowing me to, you know, talk to you and write your stories. So thank you so much. I think we'll have a break.
Thank you, Vicki, so much. Because of you, therefore, writing such an entertaining book, which I would never have written the same book at all, has caught so many people. And so because of your skills as a writer, you were able to make what was actually a very boring story of someone living up in a cave into a page turner. So well done, Vicki.
Thank you. We'll have a break.
Okay, Vicki and Jetsunma, thank you so much for that. We'll go to a little break, 5 minutes. Is that okay, Jetsunma?
Surely.
Okay, perfect. And then we'll come back for Q&A. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.
So Kamala is going to...
Hello, Vicki. Hi. Hope everybody enjoyed their break. And hello, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. Thank you so much for coming back to do this Q&A with us. I was really moved listening to the conversation between the two of you, and it felt like I had a privileged spot listening to two old friends catch up. It was really special, so thank you for that. We'll have about 20 minutes of questions and answers, but just before I go on to that, we've got about 200 people listening in on a live stream, and a lot of them have sent messages expressing their thanks to you, Vicki and Jetsunma, for having this dialogue and really rejoicing in the interactions that we've just experienced. So we'll head to questions from the Zoom room now. If anybody has questions, please do raise your hands by clicking the reactions button at the bottom right of the screen. And the first one we'll take is from Jeff Dukes. So Jeff, if you want to unmute yourself, and if you could turn on your camera so Jetsunma and Vicki can see you, that would be great. Can you unmute yourself, Jeff? Try now. Okay, maybe Jeff is unable to unmute at the moment. So we'll go to another question. If there are any other questions, feel free to click the reactions button and raise your hand. Yes, Marco and Saida, please.
First of all, I want to say how grateful I am for these wonderful conversations. So thank you very much, Vicki and Jetsunma. I have a question regarding, well, for those of us who chose to lead a householder's life, if you could give any advice, and how can we cultivate a spiritual, a contemplative path while living a householder's life? And if there are perhaps some conditions that can actually be useful for our contemplative practice in this worldly life. Thank you.
Personally, I mean, I think the daily life is very essential for bringing onto the spiritual path. The paramita, the qualities needed for Buddhahood, such as generosity, ethics, patience, and so forth, are daily challenged by meeting with others. In fact, there are many of the qualities needed on the spiritual path. We need others in order to hone our skills. If nobody ever annoys us, then how are we going to develop patience? And certainly in a family situation, for those who have children, then children are a wonderful way to cultivate so many of the qualities which we need, including not just patience, but compassion and kindness and love and generosity, and so many beautiful qualities which go beyond our ego-grasping mind. For that, we do need others. And it's also in the world where we come across obstacles, we come across difficulties, we come across challenges. This is how we hone our skills for dealing with the difficulties of life skillfully, instead of giving way to anger, frustration, irritation, self-pity. So definitely every single person that we meet, recognizing their inherent Buddha nature, their true perfection within the depths of their being, we can show them appreciation for whether they are nice to us or difficult for us. Everybody is teaching us something. And at the same time, always, whether monastic or lay, we all just have a mind and a heart which needs to be developed. I mean, just shaving your head and wearing robes doesn't make any difference to the mind. The mind's the same old mind. That's what has to be cultivated, right? and to develop our ability to be more aware, to be more present, and to open up our heart towards kindness and, you know, a loving concern for others. I don't see that really. That doesn't make any difference, monastic or lay. We are all on the path. We are all learning moment by moment by moment. So to use our daily life as our Dharma practice, not make a separation, I think it is really very crucial.
Thank
Vicki.
you so much, Jetsunma. Sorry, Vicky, yes, go ahead.
Oh gosh. Well, didn't know, I realized I was still on. Yes, well, I think Jetsunma has said it all. Yeah, I think it's, I regard myself as being remarkably selfish because I've never had children and never really wanted children. I think that it's the most extraordinary thing you can do is to have a child, to bring a child into this world, and then, you know, to carry it and to look after it and forever. Because I've got friends who are in their 70s and 60s and they're still worried about their grown-up children who have got children. You know, I mean, it's an ongoing thing of care and love and concern. I think it's the most remarkable practice in giving. Extraordinarily unselfish to get yourself out of yourself. So yes, I mean, you know, we have to deal with a lot being a householder. My roof has just leaked and I've got builders having to come in. That's a test, isn't it? And they don't come. So then you have to develop patience, which is very much not my strong suit. And it goes on and on and on. So I think we have plenty of opportunities to develop ourselves in an ordinary life. Yeah.
Thank you, Vicky. Just a reminder to everybody that if you want to ask a question, click your reaction button and raise your hand. I think we've got some questions coming in from the live stream as well. Marco and Saida, do we have any questions from the live stream?
Yes, we do actually. So I can read out one of the first questions that came in, which is directed, of course, to Jetsunma. So Jetsunma, the question is, how do you see the future of ordination for women outside the Asian cultural world?
Oh, it's difficult. Of course, there are many Western nuns in all Buddhist traditions, especially Theravada and the Tibetan tradition. But their problem is that unless they are living within a community, within a sangha, and very few are, especially in the Tibetan tradition, then it's quite a lonely life. And so many Westerners who get ordained in the Tibetan tradition, they don't really fit in with a traditional nunnery because of the cultural background and the way that nuns are trained, which is not really suitable for Westerners. A lot of emphasis on memorization and so forth. But then there are not many places outside, especially in the West, where nuns can live. There are very, very few nunneries, actually. And you might not fit in with that because also there are many different, in the Tibetan tradition, there are many different lineages. Everybody has their own teacher, their own lama. And, you know, maybe there's no nunnery which deals with the kind of lineage you're in. And so mostly people live by themselves and they feel they are not part of the Tibetan tradition anymore, you know, but they're also not part of their Western culture. They don't really fit in anywhere. And so for many of them, they feel disheartened by the lack of interest from the Tibetan side and the lack of appreciation from the Western side. And so it's not easy. is all I can say. And when people say that they wish to become ordained, Westerners say they wish to become ordained, my first question is always, well, how are you going to support yourself? Which is awful. I mean, there you are taking a vow to lead the household life, and you already have to think about finances. But in fact, there is no real support system. And if you are therefore going to, give up your profession, your work, and want to be full-time living as a monastic, just from that economic point of view, how are you going to manage? And so it's very difficult. And, even Dharma centers are mostly lay people with their own interests and their own orientation. And often you're the only monastic. Sometimes you have to support your own center and do all the teaching and do everything. And yet, there's no actual income coming from that because everything is given back to the center. And it is not like in Asia, where everything is part of their system. You're part of their culture. If you're a nun, if you're a monk in a Buddhist country or a place where Buddhism thrives, then you are part of that society. There's a place for you. Whereas in the West, except in places like Amaravati and so forth, mostly there is no place for you. So you don't belong one place, you don't belong the other. Where do you belong? So many of my Dharma sisters who have been nuns sometimes 15, 20 years, in the end, just give up. They find being a lay person, it's just easier. You just fit in with society and you just carry on your practice without trying to make any statement. So I don't see that for Westerners, that the Sangha, the monastic Sangha, is the irony is that traditionally, although the Buddha talked about the fourfold Sangha of monastics and lay people in both genders, it was always, the emphasis was always on the monks. Nuns were always in the background and overlooked, and lay people's function was to support the monks. And the monks were the professionals. They were the ones who studied, they were the ones that practiced, they were the ones that taught. And now in the West, it's the lay people who are taking on the role. They are the ones who are the scholars, both male and female, which is good. They are the scholars, they are the practitioners, they are the teachers. And the monastic side has been, especially in the Tibetan tradition, has been kind of delegated to the sidelines and of not really of that much importance. The reins of the horse has now been taken by the lay people. And so again, the Fourfold Sangha is a little bit unbalanced because now the monastic side has very little input. The good thing with the monastic side is that traditionally, because that was their career, that was profession, was being a monastic, they were the ones who had the scholarship and the experience because they had the time for it and the support. And now it's the emphasis has changed, and I don't know what the future for monasticism in the West is going to be.
Thank you, Jetsunma. Vicki, did you want to respond to that before we go to the next question?
No, I'm just very grateful to the monastics that we do have. I find their presence certainly within the FPMT centers very, very encouraging, and I think it makes a great difference. I think we need them. I think I'm quite surprised at how many people from the West have become ordained. And I think that their presence is of vital importance. I don't just want a whole secular, group of people. I think the monastics really set a tremendously important tone. They're vital, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think Jeff now is able to unmute himself and ask his question? I can see his camera there.
Sorry about earlier. The signal here in Shetland is not so good, a bit bad. But anyway, thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Tenzin Palmo. So grateful. It seems such a special time for female practitioners. It just seems to be their time. I was curious as to how Achut Tokden and the senior Tokdens, how supportive they are of the Tokden Mass, whether it's just a very natural thing for them to embrace female practitioners, or whether it was quite unusual for them to do so.
No, it was a battle the whole way.
Then I'm so sorry.
It is very interesting that when it came to the intellectual side, like nuns studying and debating, that the Kempos, the professors, were so completely supportive, and have always, the monastic college of our monastery have always sent really very excellent senior monks, Kempos, to teach the nuns, and how much they love teaching the nuns, and they're really very devoted to them. But when it came to the Tokdens, there was a lot of resistance. Our Tokdens, who are all monks, it's really a big boys club.
Okay.
And there was a lot of resistance to giving the inner yogic teachings. And I mean, I applied to many, many high lamas in our tradition to give a push to the Tokdens to open up a bit. And after 6 years of retreat, strict retreat, they finally did open up. But they expect a lifelong commitment. This is the problem. I mean, unlike other, doing a 3-year retreat, then you are immediately given the yogic teachings. In our tradition of Tokdens, then you are not given the teachings until you have made that lifelong commitment. And in our case, the nuns were already in retreat for 6 years before they were given it. And with a new group of nuns who now want that teaching, we're again coming up against this barrier. But do they have a lifelong commitment?
Okay.
And I said, well, how can they know? They said they're going to do the next 3 years. They've already done 6 years. So that's already 9 years. Come on, boys. But it's an uphill haul with them. I don't know why.
Okay.
But they are getting the teaching. And my hope is that when the nuns themselves have got to the point where they are recognized as being Tokden Ma, which will be another 3 to 6 years, that they themselves then can give the training, and we won't have to go through the boys. I mean, the boys are lovely. They're absolutely beautiful, but they are at the same time very secret and enclosed. It's a very much a boys' club. And it's been hard for them to consider opening up to include the nuns, to be honest.
Yeah. No, thank you. And now I know with Rinchen Kadrula, then the battle that she had to get, to have Geshe-Mass accepted.
It's time, but once you break through the barrier, then it's, it's broken through. I mean, of course, the next thing is a full ordination. We're working on that one. We've been working on it for the last 30 years.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And then Jetsunma, how are you doing? Can you take a couple more questions? Would that be okay? 2 more?
Sure. We're okay.
Yeah, or just one?
Give one, see how long that one is.
Okay then, all right. So the next one is Vesco. Vesco, if you could unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Well, it's actually a very short one because I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank both Vicki and Jetsunma. Vicki for the amazing 2 books, Cave in the Snow, and the book for the life of Frida Bedi, who was crucial in bringing Buddhism to the West. And they really were life-changing books for me. So thank you for this. And then obviously to thank Jetsunma for the advice that that she gives me every now and then when I communicate with her. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vesco. Okay. Is one more question okay, Jetsunma?
Okay.
From the chat. Thank you so much, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. Please, could you share some thoughts on how Tibetan Buddhism might need to adapt in order to survive into the next century?
Wow. Wow.
Well, I mean, that's a huge question. But I think the important thing to remember is that Buddhism is very adaptable. And that since it started in India, when it spread through Asia, it always adapted to the culture and needs of the country to which it went. So now, 1,000, 2,000 years later, we have, Thai Buddhism, Sri Lankan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism, which all are very different from how it was done in India. And yet it is still the same. I sometimes compare it to like if you have a vessel, like here we have porcelain, or you could have glass or gold or jade or plastic, but outwardly it looks different, but the liquid inside stays the same. It's amazing how much it does stay the same. That outwardly the form changes, but the inner nectar is still there, unchanged. So, I mean, the point is, when I first met my Lama Kamta Rinpoche, one of the first things he said was, always remember that Tibetan Buddhism is half Tibetan culture and half Dharma. So you can throw out the culture, just don't throw out the Dharma. And that sounds like good advice, except it's not like here is culture, here is Dharma, like that. It's very interwoven. So many people can't tell the difference, including Tibetans, of what is actually just culture and what is actually, the actual, teaching of the Buddha. So I think that there are already changes. For example, we mentioned there's much more input from the feminine side now. In Tibet, the feminine was almost muted. Now the voice is heard. I mean, many of the scholars are women, and many of the most famous teachers are women nowadays in the West. There is, I think that one of the problems is dealing with the language, because Tibetans on the whole like people to do everything in Tibetan, but I always say that the translator Marpa knew Sanskrit, but his student Milarepa, the great yogi, didn't. He did everything in Tibetan because Marpa, the translator, his teacher, translated it immediately into Tibetan so that he could understand what he was saying. So, the majority of people in the West following Tibetan Buddhism are never going to learn Tibetan. And to expect that we are going to pray from our heart, reciting gibberish, it doesn't work. So one of the big challenges is how to translate into a language which speaks to us, which is mellifluous, which is easy to chant, because a lot of Tibetan Buddhism is chanting, and in Tibetan it's one thing. In the West, with a polysyllabic language, it's much more difficult. So that's one thing. And then also a lot of the iconography speaks very much to some people, doesn't speak at all to others. That's also something which we have to think about, you know, how to make it relevant. I think it just is going to happen slowly, slowly, slowly. As more teachers are Westerners, teaching Westerners, they are going to apply a language and a meaning which may be different from what their original Tibetan teachers would have said. The emphasis might change. Because also in Tibet, the main practitioners were monks and yogis and hermits, but in the West, they are householders with jobs, families, social life, who also want to practice, are very sincere, but they live a totally different lifestyle. We're in the 21st century now. We're not back in the 14th century where Tibet's stuck. And so, yeah, I think that as more and more of the teachers, the lineage holders are Westerners, and they will pass on what they have understood, what has been helpful for them with an understanding of our Western culture and lifestyle, then gradually it will evolve into something which feels comfortable for Western people. And it's not just something exotic and esoteric and colorful, but it's something really meaningful which can transform their lives. Because Tibetan Buddhism, the good thing about Tibetan Buddhism, and there are many good things about Tibetan Buddhism, but the best thing is that it's a Dharma supermarket, right? There is so much there to choose from. So many different approaches, so many different techniques, so many different ways of looking at things, practicing and so forth. So it's very, very rich. It took on everything which was extant in India up to about the 12th century in the Buddhist world and imported it into Tibet. And then, of course, it merged with what was already in Tibet, especially the Bon tradition, the shamanic tradition. And they evolved a Dharma which was very rich and very powerful, very profound and very vast. And you never can get to the end of it, actually. And that is what has been its great contribution to the Buddhist world everywhere, is that it is just so full and so profound.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jetsunma. Thank you. I'm going to have to draw the conversation to a close, and we've got an announcement from Marco and Saida in a second. But before I hand over to them, I just want to express my deepest gratitude to both of you for engaging in this dialogue, the first of our inaugural Lighthouse Dialogues. It's been absolutely a pleasure to listen to you. So thank you so much, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, and thank you so much, Vicki. And thank you all who are listening. We've got about 200 people on the live stream, and we've got about 50 people in the room with us here. So it's been wonderful to spend this time with you together. And now I'll hand over to Marco and Saida so they can let you know what else to look out for.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamlo. And thanks again to Jetsunma and Vicki, and also to the whole team who is behind the scenes, providing, taking care of the technical aspects and helping us to organize these dialogues. And we'd like to quickly share screen and tell you a little bit more about upcoming events.
Yeah, so this was the inaugural event for the Lighthouse Dialogues, as you all know. And we have the next one already lined up, which is going to be on the 29th of January. And it's going to be with Sister Jayanti Kirpalani, who is actually the director of Brahma Kumara's activities in Europe and the Middle East. And she has been a spiritual teacher for over 50 years. And she's doing a great service to humanity, very engaged with climate activism. She's recently been at the COP26 to try to put some influence there about the importance of spirituality in terms of thinking about climate change and our planet. So that very much relates back to what Jetsunma was saying about, you know, positive vibrations going out to our planet as well. So we hope that you are able to join this event. And then we also have another event coming up soon, which is also to do with climate activism.
Yeah, so this is a Science and Wisdom Live dialogue with scientists and contemplative practitioners. And they are going to discuss, so our guests are Dr. Stephen Harding, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and Dr. David Loy, who are respectively an ecologist, an activist, and a practitioner and teacher in the Zen tradition of Japanese Buddhism. And they're going to discuss the connection between spiritual practice and individual transformation and having a positive influence on the planet, especially right now in the wake of COP26. We are all becoming very aware of the need for positive change in relation to the climate and environmental emergency, and how can contemplative and spiritual practice help us to develop a stronger connection to nature and also to awaken this sense of caring for the global shared resources that on which our survival is so dependent upon. So we hope that you will like to join us for these upcoming events, and you can sign up to our Science and Wisdom Live newsletter and to the newsletter of Jamyang London Buddhist Center, or visit our websites for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Goodbye, Vicki. Goodbye,
Thank you
Jetsunma.
for everything.
Thank you.
Well organised.
Everyone.
Bye, Vicki.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Have
you
a great
so much.
weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Many thanks.